Welcome to the Real Thesis Podcast. If you are new here, I am your host, Shalini, and I'm a lawyer, a screenwriter, and a director. And I started this podcast because I basically wanted to analyze films and basically look at the storytelling, the screenwriting techniques, the techniques in the filmmaking that helped enhance the story and tell the story on screen. I did it as a way of kind of improving my own art and hoping to really share with you just a deeper understanding of the story and to have a better idea of what's going on. And if you yourself are a screenwriter or a director, to basically just examine and experiment with your own writing or your own filmmaking and to figure out like, hey, how do I tell these things on screen? So thank you for being along on this journey. I hope you guys enjoy it. And if you're new here, welcome. But without any further ado, let's dive into our film for the day. So the last time that I did an episode, Leon and I did Ella Enchanted, and that movie kept making me think of this film that we are covering today, which is Upgrade. Upgrade came out in 2018, and it is directed by Leigh Whannel, and it stars Logan Marshall Green, Betty Gabriel, Benedict Hardy, and Harrison Gilbert. And I was very lucky to have seen the film in 2018, but I don't know anybody who has. Like, I think in all the years since, I've probably met like one person who's seen this film, so I really don't know how big it was. I think it was a very solid made film. It was produced by Blumhouse, so I very much enjoyed it, and I wanted to cover it today. I do have some trigger warnings. So the film touches on the topic of suicide. And also, the main character in the film is in a very traumatic car accident that leaves him a quadriplegic. So if any of those topics are just kind of sensitive to you, just skip this episode and tune into a different one. And if you watch the film, it is very graphic. There's not a lot of violent scenes. Like it's not a huge part of the film. Like it's short compared to like other films, but what you do see is very graphic. So just be warned if you go see the film. All right, now let's dive into the plot. So the film takes place in like a semi-futuristic society. It's really just like a little further into the future where you get self-driving cars. You have basically your home has like technology in it to be able to talk to you when you come home and tell you when you're out of milk. And there's drones that basically act as like mobile CCTV. And everyone is very connected to technology. And in this world, we get our main character, Gray, who is played by Logan Marshall Green. And he is a very like tech-free kind of guy. He loves working with his hands. He makes a living by repairing vintage cars and selling them online. And he's married to his beautiful wife, Asha. Gray has to basically take a car like vintage car that he's rebuilt. He has to basically deliver it to a billionaire named Aaron. So he begs Asha to come with him because he needs a ride back and he doesn't know how to work Asha's self-driving car. So they take the car to Aaron's place, they drop it off. And while they're there, basically Asha recognizes Aaron and she's like, oh, you're this very famous tech billionaire. We also, Asha works for a company called Cobalt and they would do robotic prosthetics for people. And Aaron ends up showing Asha what he's been working on, which is this microchip to be implanted in a human that could basically just do anything. So it's very cool. And on their way home, their self-driving car malfunctions and it ends up crashing in just a very like shady neighborhood. It crashes in the middle of a homeless encampment. And then these people who really don't necessarily live there, but they're like these thugs, come up on the car and drag Asha and Gray out. And they kill Asha and they shoot Gray in the neck, which paralyzes him. So after this, Gray becomes the quadriplegic. He's not able to move, but luckily, the technology has advanced so much that he's able to basically live alone. Like he has his mother, but he's basically able to live completely alone in his house without needing anybody because technology has gotten to the point that it can do almost everything for him. So he is kind of just really sad and depressed. And he goes to visit Detective Cortez, who's played by Betty Gabriel. And he's like, hey, like, what is up? What information do you have? And she's like, we really don't have a whole lot. So he gets really frustrated and depressed and he goes home and he attempts to die by suicide. And the house, he's rescued and he goes to the hospital. And when he's in the hospital recovering, he's visited by Aaron the billionaire. And Aaron tells him that if Gray is up for it, he can give him the STEM microchip and that will restore his mobility. And the only catch is that STEM has not gone through the proper checks. It's not gone through the testing and everything that it does. So this is basically a trial test. So Gray can't tell anybody about it. And he has to, in public, basically present as a quadriplegic, but he himself will have mobility again. So Gray agrees. And he gets this microchip implanted in him. And he regains his physical abilities, even a bit more so. The way it works is that the stem basically connects where his spine was severed, so it allows his brain to talk to his body. So he's able to move again, and he's very happy, and he uses this newfound freedom to basically try and hunt down Asha's killers. In the process of hunting him down, he learns that STEM can talk, and he is completely shocked. He's the only one that can hear it because the microchip is sending waves directly to his eardrum, and STEM can only hear him when he talks out loud. So he's really freaked out at first. He's like, I'm going crazy, I'm losing my mind, and STEM is like, no, you are not. But then very quickly they start to work together to identify who is responsible for Asha's death. They look at footage, and STEM is able to enhance the footage and identify one man named Cirque. So they go to Cirque's house and Gray starts snooping around. And while there, Cirque comes home and Gray has to basically fight him, and he's losing. And STEM is just very unhelpful. STEM's like, you got to be faster, you got to be more agile. And Gray begs STEM for help, and STEM is like, well, I can fight for you if you give me permission. And Gray is like, yes, I give you permission. So STEM takes over his body and he annihilates Cirque, and it is destructive. And then he goes home, and Detective Cortez, like basically the car accident and where Cirque has died is all this new. It's all this neighborhood. It's all the same neighborhood. It's under Detective Cortez's jurisdiction. So she is investigating that, but also I think she already suspected Cirque was involved in Asha's death. So she goes to investigate Cirque's death or killing. And while she's investigating, she sees drone footage of Gray driving his wheelchair down the street around the time. So she goes to visit him, and she's like, hey, how's it going? And he's like, you can't suspect me. I clearly can't do anything as a quadriplegic. But she's like, okay, fine. I can believe you. The next lead that Gray has is basically this totally tech-free bar where robots and people and technology and all these things aren't welcome. They use human cash and stuff. And Gray goes there, and he basically asks if anybody knows anything about this attack. And this man named Tolan stands up. And Gray, he doesn't even coerce a confession out of Tolan. He just basically gets Tolan to admit that he was there at the time of killing, and then he gives STEM permission to take over his body, and STEM, again, pretty badly kills Tolan. At this point, Aaron had reprimanded Gray for taking STEM on the mission to kill Cirque. He's like, look, this is millions of dollar technology. You cannot just take this on your own personal revenge mission. You have got to not get caught. First of all, if anybody finds you and catches you and wonders why a quadriplegic is moving, then they're going to question it, and they're going to take STEM away, and you are going to be immobile again. You have got to stop. So when Gray goes to this bar, Aaron is just like, you have to stop. And he basically tries to shut down STEM. STEM is already aware that Aaron is going to shut him down, so he has researched a hacker, and he directs Gray to go to this hacker and to remove the input guards. Gray does that. So basically, he gets STEM offline, jailbreaks STEM in order to allow STEM to function without Aaron knowing where he is. So Gray returns home. His mom sees him walking in, and he has to tell his mom everything. Detective Cortez visits him because now Gray's wheelchair, he leaves his wheelchair at the bar, and now his wheelchair is found near a second crime scene. So she goes to him and she's like, Gray, what is going on? You have to talk to me. And he doesn't say anything, but after she leaves, Gray has a conversation with STEM, and he's like, man, we have got to stop. We cannot get caught. We cannot keep doing this. We cannot keep killing people. And STEM is like, no, we have to keep going. He's like, no, you have to listen to me. You need to stop. And then STEM stops, and Gray falls back on the bed completely immobile. And he's like, STEM, what are you doing? And STEM is like, I have stopped. And Gray is like, you have to listen to me. And STEM says, no. You removed the input guards, which means that I don't need your consent to operate your body. And basically, STEM controls Gray's body and forces him to pursue the next lead that they have, which is to hunt down a man named Fisk. They find him, they kill him, And after they listen to his voicemails, and they find out that the person behind this entire killing of Asha is none other than Aaron. By this point, Detective Cortez has basically gotten out of Gray's mom, like, what is going on? And so she herself also ends up at Aaron's house. And Gray goes to Aaron's amazing, beautiful house to kill him. And Aaron admits, he says that I have not been in control of this company for a long time. Stem has. And Stem wanted to be human. And so I listened and I orchestrated this attack. And the whole attack was to basically paralyze Gray. And killing Asha was just confetti. It was just extra. It was also a way to help Gray feel more desperate to do something and to agree to this surgery. And the reason that Stem chose Gray is because Gray was like a very tech-free person. Other people had robotic enhancements, or they had digital fillings in their teeth, or they had, contacts, or this or that. And Gray was totally tech-free. So he was a rare specimen that had no other technology. And so Stem could basically operate every portion of his body. Stem kills Aaron. And then Stem forces Gray to kill Detective Cortez. And at this point, Gray is like, no, you cannot kill her. And he starts to physically resist Stem and to basically stop Stem from killing Detective Cortez. And he goes to shoot himself in the head when he wakes up in a hospital room and he realizes that all of this was just a dream. He has mobility. Asha walks in and she says that they had a bad accident and he's been out for days, and they are very happily reunited. However, back in the room, Gray is about to kill Detective Cortez, and she pleads with Gray not to do it. And Stem tells Detective Cortez, Gray is not here anymore. He is where he wants to be, which is in his mind. And Stem kills Detective Cortez, and he leaves and enters into the world as Gray. And that's the end of the film. Diving into the analysis, I think this film is so complex because it was so interesting. The story is quite simple. It seems like a revenge story, but there's so much complexity to it because there's so much work to develop the entire setting, the world, the situation, the environment, the society, to bring it to this point where we get a micro story within this larger world. And it's very brilliantly done because I think what I'm trying to say is like Leigh Whannel has done so much work behind the scenes to create this entire world and then give us a very small story within this world. And it's very brilliantly done. And I don't think this can be reduced to just a sci-fi story or a horror story. And I don't think it's just a revenge story. It's not a story warning about AI. It's not, it's not even a story about a man at odds with his own body. I think this story is touching on something much larger. And I'm just going to read like what I think the film is about because it was quite complex. So I think this film is about humans' tendency to hand over responsibility for the sake of ease and disassociate with the uncomfortable, thus removing psychological checks and guardrails that are necessary for keeping abilities in check. By giving other things abilities, we are handing over power and removing ourselves from the process that governs where these abilities are used, what it's used for, and how much it can grow in its capabilities. When we do check back into the process, it is often later on, and by that point, we no longer have the ability to control what is happening. I know that sounds really complex, but I want to explore this idea that basically this film is not about technology. It's not about like, ooh, AI is bad. It's definitely about our tendency to just let go of things and to hand off responsibility, to not have a hand in the ethics or the way these things should be used, and to say, okay, these things are going to handle this, or I'm not going to be in touch with this, and I'm going to step back, and things can get out of hand. So let's dive a bit more into the analysis, and I want to start with the filmmaking. So I think one of the more brilliant things about this story is the world building that happens, because Whannel takes a world that is very recognizable to our own. Well, first of all, I do want to say that he starts the story with us, like something that we recognize. So it starts with Gray just working on a car with his hands in a garage. Like he roots it in something that is familiar to us today. And we don't really realize until Gray finishes repairing the car and he opens the garage and his wife pulls up in her self-driving car that we're in a slightly different world. So he has a very brilliant way of easing us into the story. And I will say he also does something extremely brilliant with the opening credits, which is instead of just having the words on screen, there is a robot voice that reads the credits. And I'm going to try and include it, but it was just very brilliantly done because he changed the way opening credits are done, where you just announce, or you see like the production companies that produce something, it's read by an AI. So like from the moment the movie starts, we are entering this world. He gives us something to root us in something that we understand, which is Gray, who is a human and, feels about technology, like roots us in where we understand technology and then get to see how the technology in this world is incorporated. So we see things like, we see things like a self-driving car. We see the way that the home has like technology in it. We see drone footage. Oh, and we see like computers with huge databases. But we also see the limitations of these things. So for instance, Whannel shows us, and a lot of this happens in like the first 20, 30 minutes. So we have self-driving cars, but he also shows us the way that the self-driving cars can malfunction and crash. And the car that they're driving home from Aaron's house, it starts speeding and the manual override doesn't work. And it basically crashes. And they're, and I think we can deduce that STEM causes the car to crash. But like, this is one of the most real world examples because there's a lot of instances of self-driving cars crashing. There's a lot of wrongful death cases about it. And there's even a case, something that just happened last week of a self-driving car crashing. So like, yeah, in the film, we can say it would have been fine if STEM didn't control the car, but that's actually one of the most real world examples we have. We see the home automation, like basically Asha can walk in, home greets her, tells her she's out of something, needs to go to the groceries, like things like that. But we also see the way that this process can malfunction because Gray abuses the way it works to administer a near fatal dose of medicine to himself. He just keeps saying error, medicine not administered, and he keeps administering it until he's almost overdosed. I mean, he's overdosed at this point, but it's very close to being fatal. We see the drone footage. Like basically the drones are just flying around recording things, and if they sense something is happening, they can call the cops. And we see that the limitations of this because Detective Cortez explains that hackers or people, bad people can basically get a firewall built around them so that drones can't track them. And it's just very fascinating because we live in a world in which we build a firewall against bad people or people looking to hack. And like in this world, everything is open, everything is accessible, and the firewall is around people who want to like be hidden. So that's very interesting. And they have these databases, like their computer technology is just amazing. And we see the limitations of that because Detective Cortez, like very early on, begins to suspect Gray, and she goes to put Gray in the database as a suspect, as someone they should be watching, and the computer just won't accept him because he's a quadriplegic. So even though she is correct, she can't pursue this because she is she has to do things like she does. She just goes and asks herself. She takes it into her own hands. She doesn't rely on technology in the same way Gray doesn't. But if she did, like she wouldn't be able to pursue that lead because it wouldn't accept him. So like in this world, like Whannel shows us where technology is going, which is very synonymous to what we see today. And at the same time, he also shows us like how it's limited and how it malfunctions or how it can be abused or how it's evolved in a way that's not always great. And all of this gets us to this point where we see how humans have completely relied on technology and integrated so seamlessly into their lives, even though these things are imperfect. And, you can say that humans are imperfect too, but I think it's more scary because the computers and stuff have greater capabilities for damage, so both things are fallible. And I guess perhaps in some way one is worse than the other, but I think to some extent we don't quite know the extent of the way technology and things can be dangerous or fallible or make people susceptible to harm. Okay. I want to talk a little bit about the actual filmmaking because I think they did something very brilliant that, again, really touches on this thesis. So a lot of the film is very normal. Like, I don't want to say normal, but like, the filmmaking techniques don't necessarily stand out. But the fight scenes is when I think they have very incredible use of cameras. They use a MKV Omega R rigged Steadicam. And basically, like, they're able to have a camera that is incredibly, like, able to move. That's usually what Steadicams are. There's a lot more fluidity in it. And then they were able to program the camera to an app on a phone, and they strapped that phone to the actor. So the camera is locked in on a very specific point on the actor, and that is strapped to the actor so we don't see it. But the camera is able to very quickly and freely follow the actor as he's doing action scenes. And I'm definitely going to include some clips, but it was just brilliant because when we film humans, we're kind of capturing all of the essence of a human. Like, we're capturing their movements, their hands, or this, or that, their facial expressions. Like, it's very organic the way that filmmaking has developed to like capture humans and how they move on screen. I think Whannel found something really cool because he first of all is using technology, and he also is trying to get the camera to recognize technology. And in doing that, that creates a very robotic effect because the actors are moving very quickly. The fight scenes are choreographed very quickly. And so the camera is having to use very quick technology to follow it, and it is robotic. And so it conveys the idea that we are looking at a robot. So we get these scenes when STEM is controlling Gray and STEM is doing more robotic things. So it's absolutely brilliant. And I do want to shout out Chris Anderson, who is one of the choreographers. I think he very intricately choreographed a lot of the fight scenes because it doesn't look like it's meant to look calculated. It's meant to look the way a computer would think a fight is supposed to be, and it's not meant to look like jiu-jitsu or karate or very specific forms of fighting. And they really did a good job with it. I do want to move on to the acting because Logan Marshall Green's acting is so good. And honestly, like, he's been in so many things, and like I think we could have I could use more stuff with him. I could use an Upgrade TV show, which is scrapped, and this is my bit to be like, you guys, there's a lot to work with. I would love to pick up STEM in like where he's been in the last 10 years. Like, you have a whole world built in. Like, let's get a TV show of Upgrade. But I go back to Logan Marshall Green because his acting is amazing in the sense that he has to be like physically doing things, physically fighting, physically like cutting people, but his facial expressions are just shock and disgust. Like, oh my gosh, what is happening? Like, what are you doing, STEM? This is horrific. Like, he's freaked out because he's never done this, but his body is doing this. So it's so amusing, and it's even funny at times, and it's well done because he's moving like a robot, but his face is just like, what's happening? So I loved it. And I did think of Ella Enchanted because Anne Hathaway does the same thing. Like, when she's forced to do something, like to act out of obedience, there are a few times that even her face was like, her facial expression is like, what's happening? And her body is like very fluidly doing something else. So I do need to call out his acting because I don't think you could have conveyed that from here up is Gray, but from here down is STEM, if not for this person's acting, if not for the great choreography by Chris Anderson. Like, there's so much work that went into conveying this idea, and it came across extremely well. And now I do want to transition into the story now that I've brought up all these points. I said like Ella Enchanted made me think of this movie. And the reason I say that is because Ella Enchanted is a story about a girl who's cursed to be obedient. So she is often doing things that she doesn't want to do. And in the film, it does come off as funny because she is physically doing things that she's shocked that she can do, or surprised, or just like, so it's definitely played for laughs. In this movie, STEM is in control of Gray's body, and Gray ends up doing a lot of things that he doesn't want to do. For instance, in the very first fight that we get, like, STEM is annihilating Cirque. Like, he is very physically beating him up, and Gray is out loud telling Cirque, like, stand down, man, because Cirque cannot hear STEM. Cirque just thinks Gray is being a killing machine. So Gray is telling Cirque, like, yo, just stand down. Don't get up. Like, this, I am going to kill you if you keep fighting. And he's telling him to stand down, and he cannot control STEM. And STEM kills Cirque. And we get this, like we see this, like either Grey is in control or Stem is in control, but they don't quite have shared control. And it's interesting because there's a lot of times that Stem has to rely on Grey's ability as a human. For instance, like Grey has to pick a lock, and Stem can't do that because it wasn't a electric door. Stem can't drive Grey's car because Grey is, it's not electric, so Stem can't control the car. So they really do make a great team, but it is always Grey who is in control, and then he gives consent to Stem, and then Stem is in control and relinquishes control to Grey. But that obviously changes once the in-part guards are removed, and at that point, Stem can just take control whenever it wants. I do want to mention that I think the first time that you see Stem acting beyond its ability is when Grey is killing Tolan. They're trying to coerce a confession. Like, they got the confession that Tolan was there, but they want to know who was in control or who did this. So Grey goes to cut up Tolan, and he can't bring himself to do it. So Stem's like, I'll do it. And they cut up Tolan, and Grey is just looking away while his hands are like cutting him up. And Grey is like, enough, Stem, enough. And like Stem doesn't stop until Stem thinks Tolan is cut up enough that he'll confess. So that's the first time that we see Stem kind of exercising its own judgment of when it thinks it's enough, which is pretty creepy, to be honest. But I also want to say that, at one point, Grey tells Detective Cortez, like, if I could raise my hand and if I could pull the trigger and if I could kill these people who killed my wife, I would. And he says all this knowing that he can't. Like, he has been faced with this ability to kill the people who killed his wife, and he doesn't have it in him. He has these limitations because at the end of the day, he is a human. He has human consciousness. He has feelings. He has awareness that these are other people, and he doesn't have it in him to kill them. And, Stem doesn't have that. And when they go to a bar, like, he takes a shot and Stem is like, I don't understand why humans have to impair their mind or impair their functioning. And Grey is like, yeah, because you're a computer. You don't have to forget every mistake you've ever made. And Grey sits with his mistakes, He is the one who dragged Asha to drop off the car with Aaron. Like, if he didn't do it, she wouldn't have been in the car when Stem hacked the car and crashed. Like, she may not have died. I truly think she was just like a bonus, or she was like since she was there, she was killed, but it was him that they were after. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, like, Grey, we see the ways that, like, being human is what stops us, or it can be what motivates us too. Like, there is, Grey is able to kill Fisk, and it's hard because they're two robots fighting, but in the end, he's able to kill Fisk because he basically goads him. He realizes that Cirque is Fisk's brother, and he goads him into acting out of emotion instead of robotically, and he's able to get him that way and kill him. But like, we see the way that being human puts limitations on what a person can do. And the computer doesn't think that way. The computer is basically going towards an outcome without stopping. But the humans, and to them, the outcome is like, kill everybody who killed Asha. But Grey wouldn't have done any of that. So it's very scary when he relinquishes control to Stem, because Stem doesn't have the parameters. He doesn't have the consciousness, the guilt, the awareness of human life that Grey has that would have stopped him from doing these things. So it makes him a very scary entity to have relinquished power to. So at the beginning of this essay, I talked about how this film is not about AI. It's not about technology. It's not about revenge. It's basically about the human's, ability and tendency to hand over responsibility and to check out morally, consciously of what is going on, and basically let things get out of hand. And I say all of this because this story directly parallels Fight Club. If you have not seen Fight Club, if you want to read it and have not read it, just turn off the podcast now, because the rest of the time I'm going to be talking about Fight Club. And for continuity's sake, I am just going to be talking about the book. The book and the movie are extremely similar, but I'm just going to look at the source material of the book. And the main character is never named in the book, but I'm going to call him Jack, because he's always like, I'm Jack's evil twin. I'm Jack's, I don't know. He's always just like, I'm Jack's something, which means he's not Jack, but like, it's just easier to call him Jack because he doesn't have a name. So in Fight Club is a story about a man who is incredibly dissatisfied with his life. And so he turns to this like chaos general, Tyler Durden, to basically rebel in quiet ways in his life and to create chaos and to regain a sense of self and autonomy in a world that he feels like he has no power in. And it very directly parallels what is happening in Upgrade. Gray has no power. He's truly a quadriplegic and he has to rely on STEM. And right out of the gate, like, it doesn't take, obviously it's a film and it's a short film and whatnot, but like, it doesn't take long for Gray to realize his limitations and to realize that what he can do can be done so much faster and better with the assistance of STEM. And I will say that Fight Club is not about technology. The book was written in 1996. I can't, obviously they may mention a computer or a cell phone, but the whole point of the movie or the book is about the grittiness and the realness of being human and bleeding and feeling things. And so technology is not at all a part of it. And yet we see this tendency of both characters to turn to something else for a sense of power that they themselves do not have in each other. And spoiler alert, Jack is Tyler Durden. And he realizes that, about 2/3 into the book. But this entire time, he didn't feel like he could do any things. He didn't feel like he could live like Tyler Durden. He didn't feel like he could get girls like Tyler Durden. He always admired Tyler in some kind of way until Tyler started to annoy him. But like, Tyler was this manifestation of things that he could not do beyond his capability. In the same way, Gray very quickly sees the way the STEM can do things that they cannot. Between the first fight where Gray is fighting Cirque and where Gray is fighting Tolan, there's a huge change. He's kind of freaked out at what STEM can do. He's shocked when STEM is killing Cirque, and then by the second time when he's fighting Tolan, he's like, him and Cirque are like buddies. Like him and STEM are buddies. They are like buddy cops. Very seamlessly, STEM like neutralizes his pain receptors, and when they get the confession, Gray's like, "Okay, STEM, you can take over," and they just do it. So that's very obvious that Gray is heavily relying on STEM to do things that he cannot do, and he doesn't care. He has no problems offloading these responsibilities of killing people onto STEM and to do what he cannot do, because it's going to get him to this end goal of finding who killed his wife. Things also escalate very quickly. In Upgrade, it truly just starts as a very simple conversation. Gray is watching the drone footage and going through the papers and trying to find anything that could help him identify Asha's killers. And STEM just says, "Can I point something out?" And he's able to point out, and I didn't get into this, but he's able to point out that a gun is not used and that Fisk is actually using his hand. I guess I'll touch on this now because I didn't touch on it. And this is what I mean by world building. Fisk and Tolan are basically people who, I think they were both soldiers and they were injured in fighting for the United States. And the government basically turned them into an experiment in which they had guns implanted in their arms. So there's a whole group of people in which they can basically like load bullets into their bicep and they can shoot people. Fisk has the ability to, I don't think they're contacts, but like he wants to see Tolan's memory before Tolan died. So he's able to just like put a pin in Tolan's eye and like see through his eyes what Tolan saw. Fisk threatens the bartender of this tech-free bar and the guy is like, "Look, get out of here." And there's a race thing and Fisk is like, "You should be, you should respect us as the superior race of these half humans, half robots." And he sneezes these like tiny metal things that go into the air and kill the bartender. And this is what I mean by the world is so rich in Upgrade. Like there's so much to work with, and technology, like we see the way that technology has made people's lives easier. And in the same way, we see a parallel growth of how technology has facilitated people to have control and to wield it in crazy ways. And to use it for bad. And I think that is always the conversation, is that when you have growth in one area, you have growth in another. And I think of like that line at the beginning of the 6th Harry Potter book when the Prime Minister tells the Minister of Magic, he's like, I don't understand. Like, how do you have bad guys? You guys have magic. And the Minister of Magic is like, yeah, but the bad guys have magic too. And it's like, that is what we see. Like, as things are progressing for good, we're also seeing ways that they're going to be progressed for ill use, for bad, for harm, for ways that are harmful to others. So I bring all of this up because it is a very quick escalation between, can I point something out, and going on a killing spree. And the same thing happens in Project Mayhem and Fight Club. It truly just starts with two guys having a fist fight behind a bar, and it ends with them blowing up a building and killing people, killing multiple people. It escalates very quickly. And in Fight Club, Jack eventually comes to the realization that he's Tyler Durden, but he also comes to the realization that he has to stop this. And at that point, it is way too late. Like, he is actively a part of it. He's being taken on ride-alongs and he cannot stop it, even though he is like, I am Tyler Durden, stop this. And people will not listen to him. In the same way with Gray, he goes to stop STEM. And when he stops STEM, the input guards have already been removed and there's nothing that he can do about it. So maybe it's worth, going back to my thesis, rereading it, which is, this film is about humans' tendency to hand over responsibility for the sake of ease and disassociate with the uncomfortable, thus removing psychological checks and guardrails that are necessary for keeping abilities in check. When we give these abilities away, we are handing over power and removing ourselves from the processes that govern where these abilities are used, what it's used for, and how much it can grow in its own capabilities. When we do check back into the process, it is often later on, and by that point, we no longer have the ability to control what is happening. We really see this in both films, and we see this in Upgrade, and like I said, this is not a movie about AI is bad. It's not a movie about technology is bad, because we see the way that it is very helpful. For instance, Asha's company Cobalt creates prosthetic limbs for people, and it gives people mobility and freedom. And, for someone like Gray to have the independence to live alone as a quadriplegic is a beautiful thing. But I think as we move forward, we have to be considering, we have to be checked into the processes. We have to be aware of where things are going. We have to be careful of the power that we're handing over and continuously to question how it is used, where it is being used, how it is being yielded. We cannot just completely remove ourselves from the process, because we are very quickly escalating into a place and in a space where we are losing control of things. We are giving away our power, our rights, our privacy, and it's very hard to reel that back in. And, talking about the ending of the film, both films end with the character trying to fight themselves. Both films end with the character shooting themselves, or at least attempting to shoot themselves. And Gray doesn't succeed. He is defeated by STEM. His mind breaks, and STEM is able to take complete control of his body, and his mind is trapped in a virtual reality, which is happier for him. And it's a better existence than the real world. And Fight Club differs because he shoots himself in the head and he ends up in, it's vaguely described kind of like heaven. And he's like, I've escaped it. I've ended it. I've defeated Tyler Durden. I've ended Project Mayhem. And he's kind of in this blissful ignorance. But he's aware of the fact that people around him sometimes call him Mr. Durden. And sometimes they'll say things like, the planet is moving on well, Mr. Durden. And it's this acknowledgement that it's too late. By the time he tries to stop Tyler Durden, Project Mayhem is already set loose into the world, and there's nothing that he can do to reel it back. So both are very much cautionary tales, and both are a reflection of not AI, not anything other than our own tendencies. The things that make us human are the things that connect us to this world. And that is our human emotion. It is our guilt. It is our consciousness. It is our recognition that the person on the other side is a person at the end of the day. And those are the kinds of psychological checks that are necessary to make sure that we are acting for the greater good, for better, to help others and not for harm. And when we basically hand over things and remove ourselves from the process, we're also removing our awareness of what is happening. We are removing ourselves from any sense of guilt over the responsibility and how it is yielded. We cannot close our eyes, put our heads in the sand, and let things progress without us ever checking in and knowing what's going on. And I know that's such a roundabout way of saying it, but I hope you got the message. And that is all I have for you today. I really hope you enjoyed this essay. I know it was a very complex one. It's not actually that complex of a film. There's just a lot to digest. And there's many things I didn't talk about. And I'm going to say this again to all the people who are thinking about greenlighting an upgrade series. Please give it to us because I think it could do really well. There's a lot to unpack and I barely touched the surface. So I'm going to include a lot of links because I found great articles that had great things to say. And I also found a very cool behind the scenes video where you get to see how the Steadicam tracks a person's movement. So definitely check it out. It was so cool. I'm going to link an article that I wrote about Fight Club. It's not comparing Upgrade and Fight Club, but it basically touches on Fight Club and what is happening in that, if you'd like to read. And I'm also going to try to include people who are just discussing ethics and AI. AI is truly at the forefront of all of our conversations, but just ethics and technology in general. This has been something that the question of ethics should always have been discussed alongside technological advancements, and it's not, but there are some great people out there who are advocating for this stuff. So I'm going to try and include some links to that. But that's it. I hope you enjoyed this essay. We are here right now. We're publishing every other week. So definitely tune back in and I will see you soon.